Should we talk
All right.
about the Marty Cagan transformation thing?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
what do you
yeah.
want to do?
Yeah.
Let's
hey,
do that.
hey, here's an idea. So, what encouraged you to want to talk about Marty Cagan? Like, what brought
Well,
that
Marty
up?
Cagan's super interesting. Like every time I listen to him or read his stuff, it's like it's enlightening. I noticed, and that article has like 10 things. I think I don't know how I got 15
Yep.
hours out of 10. But the one that I screenshotted and sent to you guys is like, again, I feel like I have seen this point made over and over and over and over again in various places, coming from various people, different areas. The idea that you, in fact, Tom Gilb talks about this. He talks about outcome-based development, right? All the smart people that I look up to and want to be like them someday, they all talk about the outcomes, going after outcomes, and then that leads you straight to, well, how do you measure the outcomes? How do you measure the value, right? Everybody agrees you should be looking at value. And many people say, well, but how do you measure value? That's difficult. And so Marty, I just saw, in point number 9 or whatever, is making that point again. Like you're not going, and we just said it here, like we're not, the stuff above the waterline in the iceberg are processes, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about standing up for 15 minutes. I mean, you might have to stand up for 15 minutes, but that's not what we're teaching you. We're teaching you to quantify what your business outcomes are. Why would you use this tool in the first place? And focus on that, capture that somehow.
Yeah.
And use that as your test to say if
So-
you have to keep working.
For audience context, number 9 in the Marty Cagan article was the prioritizing predictability over outcomes.
Which
Did I
is
get
a
the
fail point. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually I can go a little bit further. So the reason that was interesting is because sometimes you see organizations where they just can't even ship, right? They're having real difficulties. So the people in the tech side, right, have a responsibility to build stuff that supports the business. And the business has plans, right? They want to do this thing by the first quarter next year or whatever. They have to do this thing by 2025. And they're relying on the technical people to ship some solutions for that. And so they need predictability, right? They need some sense of, we can plan for this safely because we're going to have the tech in place by the time we get there.
Right.
And if you're an organization and you're having trouble making those and meeting those commitments, you might want to focus on predictability for a while just to prove that you can do it, just to build out those systems and capabilities that allow you to ship predictably. And Marty comes along and is like, yeah, but you don't want to, like, congratulations, you got your boots on. That doesn't mean you're done with the mission. Like, that's like, sorry, my watch just talked.
Yeah.
That's like this. That's like table stakes. Like, of course you have predictability, right? Once you can ship, okay, what are you shipping? Like, are you shipping the right? You're not just mindlessly putting out increments, right? The increments have to be demonstratively connected to outcomes, measurable outcomes that speak to business. So it just struck me as, I don't know, maybe where I was at the time. But
Okay.
it's predictability is like a stepping stone towards a system that actually is designed around outcomes.
One that stood out to me was the peanut butter product strategy. That you just spread your resources out across all the initiatives
Yeah.
and hope for the best.
Because all that stuff has to happen, right? You're not challenging those assumptions. We know that has to happen, so just go do everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a
But
lack
in
of
terms-
focus.
It's a
But
lack
in terms of
focus.
predictability, isn't the drive for predictability somewhat tied to cost too? Like, if we can't tell when we're going to get done, we don't have any idea how much this is going to cost us to do,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Or we've already promised these features to the client, and we also promised them a date. So
Well, did we promise them a date, or did they tell us the date? How many times do they come to you with the date and say, by the way, by April of next year, we need X, Y, and Z online to replace this system or some other thing, or we need to snag a new market opportunity.
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Sometimes
sometimes it's legitimate. Regulatory things, for example. And you and I, we've all worked in regulated industry before. Regulations come down and it's like, this will be complied with by May 1st or whatever. And you're going to do it. You better do it.
Sometimes the government promises you a date.
Right. So
Yes.
you've got, no doubt fixed dates are a thing and deadlines are a thing and you need to do that. But I think that what ends up happening is instead of coming at you and saying, what can we do that's going to achieve that goal by that date? And distill it down to what's the least amount of stuff we have to do to hit that. They instead come up with a very flowery, very feature-rich solution that will, in addition to meeting that need, do it in the most vivacious and outgoing and flamboyant way possible, and it's all 100% necessary, and you'll have to do that, right?
Vivacious. Wow.
Those are interesting
know, I was
adjectives to
just
apply to a tech solution.
I was
But-
trying to come up with something that didn't sound like the one I listened to the other night. You were really coming down on negative connotations. So I was trying to come up with positive connotations as
Fair
feedback
enough.
to you.
That is the most tangential form of feedback I've ever gotten in my life. But yes, I think I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
And what enables that is specifying the tasks, right? Specifying the solution as opposed to
Yeah, they
specifying
specify
the
the
problem.
solution. Yeah.
Instead of specifying here's the problem, here's why it exists, here's the minimum
Right.
conditions
And they don't
for
think
success.
and they don't think about minimum really well.
Right.
And so
Because-
I
why
think
is
somebody
that?
gave me an example. They asked a question. They said, well, like, how are we supposed to break up if someone says, I need a car? How am I supposed to break up I need a car? Until I've got an engine, I don't have a car. And I said, well, yeah, but there are simple cars. And you got to get at, first of all, they're simple cars. But second of all, there's getting from point A to point B. What is the purpose of the car?
Yes.
I need to get from point A to point B. What are solutions that will get me there? And then can we experiment and see what is the least we can do to achieve that in a successful or acceptable way to the customer? And people keep hearing that and saying, well, I'm going to give some substandard, subpar solution to the customer. It's like, no, that is an experiment to see if you're on the right track. But where I landed, I said, if you're really convinced that what you need is a car is achieved at a Yugo. It's not achieved at a Mercedes-Benz S-Series convertible.
What? It depends. I mean, so the question isn't really what kind of car do you want. The question is, where are you going?
Yeah.
Right? And do you need to carry anything? And what are your needs? Speed, reliability, yeah, all of these things, right?
Right. And when you think in terms of jobs to be done,
Yeah.
thank you, Clayton Christensen.
Yeah.
What else has to be part of it? Because people aren't. Yes, the core is I need something, a device, a vehicle to get me from point A to point B, but that's not the entire job. I need a vehicle to get me from point A to point B in style because
Okay.
and so that's the job to be done, and it's a different job based on the market.
It doesn't
Right?
even look like a job to a lot of people. They're like, style. I need to. I have hay I need to get across. I don't care. I just want to spend the least amount of money, right? So
You want style, I can give you heated seats in that tractor.
right.
We've got
Yes.
and
Yes.
And who
so
knows how the
distinction-
customer's thinking about it until you.
And the distinction that the product people struggle with is and it's based on history. It's this historically they have gone to technology and said, "Give me a solution," and they didn't get it.
Yeah.
They didn't get what they wanted, and in fact, the deadline became so bad that they had to throw away things they really needed in order to get anything. And so they're coming at this from, if I don't make everything a must-have, if I don't make everything 100% priority, I'm going to lose stuff because anything I show weakness on, they're going to toss on me.
Right.
People
because
have
I already-
adapted to the system.
Yeah. And so it takes time to overcome that historical roadblock, right? And so if you can get to a point where you're doing more frequent presentations of progress, you might overcome some of that doubt. if you can get to the point where you can release incremental improvements, then you'll overcome some of that doubt. And if they start to believe, okay, so I really can give you the minimum viable thing, and I'll get that in short order, and then we've got time still to build on the bells, the whistles, the style.
You kind of have to reset the relationship, or nothing convinces people like making small, frequent commitments and actually delivering on them.
Yeah.
You have to change people's understanding of how the system works, and you have to,
Yeah, and there's that. There's also from a stakeholder perspective, there's a how much patience do they have, right? So if there's a long span of time that passes and they don't see progress, they might start wondering where the money's going.
They should.
Right?
They're funding this thing every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If it's a sprint team, they put X number of dollars into it. What did they get back?
Right. And then they
Perfectly
keep being
normal.
told from the industry that they're supposed to be getting shippable product at the end of every 2 weeks, and it's been 6 months and I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
Why am I throwing that? I sound like I'm wasting my money. And meanwhile, the team is going, well, in order to show you anything, we had to rebuild the entire infrastructure. We had to do all this. And it's all behind the scenes. So we didn't bother to show you any of it because you wouldn't have understood it anyway.
Yeah. No, that's a failure of product management, I think. I have this conversation a lot. It's like, well, how do you even talk to a vice president about what happens in a database? It's like, I don't know. You find a way to frame it.
Well,
Like,
why would you
what-
talk to them about what's in a database? I mean, if you're
Well-
not talking in the terms that they understand, it's gobbledygook.
Yeah, but I mean, this same vice president, I'm sure, like pays for oil changes on his car or her car, right? Like they are familiar with this concept. Like you can't just there's maintenance that's required based on the nature of the thing. So frame it that way, right? But like you can't spend their money and not tell them like what it's for.
Right.
Totally.
So if you
You
can
know,
get
and this-
them, go ahead.
This all gets kind of to the point that I was thinking in the back of my mind as we're talking. And that failure point, and you just pointed that out, whether you call it product management, product ownership, whatever. Whoever is functioning in that role, maybe they don't understand, and we've talked about this in trainings in the past, where the product person is not an order taker.
Right.
Your job is not to, okay, customer, tell me what you want and I'll get it and I'll throw it over the wall and they'll get it for you.
Right.
No. It doesn't work. It shouldn't work like that. Tell me what you want and why you want it. Tell me the story of what's paining. You don't go to the doctor and tell them,
I
Hey.
have appendicitis.
even though the drug companies will tell you, talk to your doctor about taking this. It's like, how about the doctor talking to you about it? Tell them this is what I need. In other words, no, you don't do that. You say, hey, I got an ache here or a pain or something like that, or something weird's going on. I need a solution. And let the doctor use the intellect and training to come to the solution. But,
Yeah. It would be really dumb to go to my doctor and be like, hey, you need to take my spleen out and completely ignore all the training, the knowledge, the experience, the diagnostic tools. You leaving the value of all that stuff on the table. But
I think this can be metaphorically expanded too, because then you've got your expert who says this is what you need and defines a treatment plan, and then an insurance company comes in and second guesses that and says you don't really need that.
Yes.
I don't know who the insurance company is in this.
Yeah,
in
the
this
metaphor
scenario,
is exploding.
it's there
But to be fair to some product owners, like there are some big companies that are set up in such a way that the product owner doesn't actually own anything. What they've got is they have a big portfolio of stuff that somebody very highly important in the organization has decided shall happen, and they basically handed it off to product owners whose job is, the real job in that case is to break the stuff down that everybody already knows has to happen. For some reason, we don't know why, we haven't actually checked a lot of those assumptions, but like that's actually the job. But that's not what I hear you saying is that that's not really product ownership. That's like,
But there's still somebody in that role. Maybe the product owner is not,
Maybe
you've
the
got
product
these
manager, the
legions
product
of
director,
product owners, but somebody, presumably,
you'd hope.
is talking to the customer, and if they're not, that's a different problem, and that's your first problem.
Yes.
But somebody is doing that, and however they're meeting out this this work in a portfolio, all right, that's their operating model for better or for worse.
Yeah.
But somebody's getting that information and hopefully validating this is legit.
Hopefully. Because what happens otherwise, sometimes this does happen, is people make assumptions at the high level, and you just and you don't actually ever check those assumptions by creating little increments and running it past people who will actually make the decision. And that's the failure mode for a lot of these big companies, is they're accumulating risk and they don't realize it. Like, Agile's one of the best ways of talking about Agile with senior people is it's a good way to manage risk, because you don't wait until the end, right? And then find out. You check continuously.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I've seen, and this just came to mind, there's a temptation to rely on industry analysts. Oh, the industry analysts say we should do this because we need to have this feature, and this feature to be competitive. Like, oh, maybe, but
That's
they're
like
using,
saying this
they're
guy
using,
says, so this guy says I need to have my spleen out.
right. So they're using the industry analysts as a proxy, basically. And there's nothing wrong with going and getting as much information as you can, listening to the industry analysts. But if that's being done in place of actually talking to customers,
Checking yourself.
you're adding a level of risk that you're going to miss the mark, or you're going to build something and, we only got about 40% of the people that used it.
All right.
So then you wasted time.
Yeah. If you're responsible for your outcomes, then you have to check, period.
Okay, so one thing that I keep running into is this. We talk about this product owner role. We bank on the product owner role. We say you need to find the person, you need to find someone with the skills to wrangle all these stakeholders, all these customer concepts, all these technical debt concepts, to prioritize these and flesh these out and be the person who can not only speak authoritatively about why this decision was made this way, but judge whether or not the solution is acceptable. Take that back to, so we're defining somebody with a tremendous toolbox of
That's
capability, and we've even made the statement, I've heard it said, and we say it too, that that concept of a product owner is a unicorn. It is very rare, if it exists at all, especially in a large organization. If you're in a small startup, chances are you got the one person who's doing it, right? Or a very small universe of people with that skill. The larger your organization gets, the more distributed that capability gets, and so you stop having the ability to just point at one person and say that's going to be our one thing, that's our unicorn. And I keep seeing people just kind of throwing up their hands and going, there's nobody like that in this organization. How are we supposed to fill this role?
Well, the thing I come back to is the system needs it. Right? If you're going to have a successful development organization that serves the business, somebody has to answer that question. It's an input that is required for successful development, right?
Okay, but how do we enable that?
Yeah. Hiring. Is it a hiring problem? Is it leadership doesn't know that they need that person? Can we not find them?
Is that person really not in the organization? Or is it the organization is structured such that that person or persons are buried, they're hidden?
Maybe you've got the unicorn, but the organization is functionally a desert And unicorns don't survive in deserts. Just taking your analogy
Okay.
and twisting it a
So
little bit.
maybe so the question is, who actually has the knowledge to be able to do all that stuff? Who has the capability to do all that stuff? Who has the right mindset to do all that stuff?
The
And are
authority.
they still in the role that will allow them to feed into that? So one argument could be that when this mythical company starts, you've got somebody who was always had their finger on the pulse, was talking to the customers, was doing this stuff, would come back and represent those needs. Then the organization grew and the customer base grew, and the need to talk to more people outstripped this one person's ability to do all that. So he created helpers. So they hired people to either maybe at first be a peer who would also do that, or subordinates who did that for them. Okay, depending on what kind of organizational structure you're headed toward, both of those are likely outcomes, right?
Yep.
And then as the organization grows, those subordinate roles get subdivided. In the subordinate model, they get subdivided. So eventually you're getting to the point where somebody who may have been in a point where they could have been the person with all those capabilities has subordinated the BA part of it to a role. They've subordinated the product manager part to somebody else. They've subordinated the technical lead, whatever that mythical role between technology and I think. But the point being, it's no longer one person. And especially the gap between technology and business, that gap widens. So how do we practically go into an organization and say, we need you to come up with a product owner, somebody? We're not going to tell you what their title is. We're not going to tell you what their rank is or anything, but who would you need who can do this? Stakeholder outreach, customer outreach, technology understanding, all this other stuff. And the more you heap on that pile, the less you see those people. The less you see people do that. And maybe, or the original person way back when, maybe the only person who ever had all the eggs in the basket, right?
So maybe you need to hire something like a chief product officer. Maybe you need to start by defining the reason the organization needs this product ownership function is because there's a fair amount of uncertainty and you need somebody who can manage all the aspects of the uncertainty. So maybe you shouldn't be hiring at the product owner level on the team because they won't have all of this breadth. Maybe you need to start hiring in the C-suite and say somebody who's going to be here who can establish product and has the authority to make sure all these different parts are there. Because you try to build a system of delivery, right? Which has, again, it's like any other system. If you don't have all the parts in there, it's not going to run. Right. Does that make sense? Or is that what you were getting at?
I don't know if I was getting at a solution. I was framing the problem. Jeff, do you have anything you want to weigh in there on?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, it sounds to me like what you just walked through, Mike, in that growth model as they grow along, an organization grows, that they're not just building a product, they're actually building a bureaucracy in that subordinate model. And so when I work with startups, that's the one thing I want them to understand is at some point you will grow. Do not grow into the bureaucratic BS that we see, that you're the big guys that you're trying to beat down. Otherwise, you become them. And so if they can get that, they can still grow. It's a different growth model, though. It's that networked growth model where,
where you're creating peers, you're not creating.
Precisely.
Right.
Precisely. So, that's one way to nip that in the bud early on. Now, when we walk into a large organization that is already they've
The
got
unicorn
these
has
layers
already
and
left the
layers
barn.
and layers. Yes, absolutely. The unicorn is actually, they cut his horn off,
Yeah.
or her horn off, just because it's like,
Now they
well,
have a
you know what?
disabled horse.
Yeah.
Right, you've got a horse now. I think
You got a Shetland pony. You got
the I think we get too tied up in our shorts with titles and stuff. I mean, even as, you know, agilists, ardent agilists, it's like, can we stop focusing on
Yeah.
product owner? This is what. Let's just shut up about that for a minute. How about we talk about what is needed, experience-wise, role-wise, and I think to the points that you were making, Mike, there are some things that are, man, you got to have this. What are the top three? What are the top three things a good product person is doing? And then there's going to be the next three, and then the next three. And so are you going to find somebody with the top 10 inside your organization? Maybe not, but you might find somebody that's got the top 3 or top 4, and they will have to learn to grow into those others. But remember, you're prioritizing. And so the other, you know, the bottom 3 or 4 abilities, capabilities, hopefully, you know, you're bringing in coaches to help coach those, the strength of those other capabilities to buttress that. But if you're starting at least with the top 3 or 4, that's, I think, one possible way you can at least identify who are the people in the organization that can occupy this role and understand the criticality of it. I don't know.
See, now this is where I see the wisdom in Scrum at Scale, where they did the product owner cycle, and it treats the product knowledge loop as a product in a way, right?
Oh, that's
the
interesting. I
outcome
forgot
of
about that.
That the outcome of that cycle is a unified vision, direction, list of things that need to get done. And you've got a cross-functional team of people whose job it is to bring all those scattered pieces of knowledge together so they can create a focused product increment. And you only need that if your organization has bifurcated to the point where you don't have a unicorn anymore. You've just got pieces of unicorns. You got unicorn steaks all over the place.
Unicorn steaks, those sound expensive.
There's a violin
And illegal.
They're an endangered species.
Oh, I would assume extremely rare.
Yeah.
Well, yes, Mike, I tend to agree. I think the one issue, though, even with Scrum at Scale,
Is that Ramona?
It is Ramona. She,
Okay.
yes, she needs to go out.
is that you've got a chief product owner. I do think that having that product owner cycle is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Having layers, you know, with a chief product owner and everything, I think you still have to be very careful about how does that go, because once again, you're adding layers. You could be adding layers of bureaucracy. Now, we've all been through Scrum at Scale training and everything, and so we know that the mindset is not, you know, you want minimum viable bureaucracy, and so the mindset is you only build, let's say, that chief product owner if and when you need that.
Yes, absolutely.
But organizations frequently that are adopting, let's say they adopt Scrum at Scale or some version of that, the problem is they view it as, oh, we need to have a chief product owner. Not necessarily.
We don't have one of those. Let's hire that.
Let's
so we
hire
can add
that,
Another,
or-
let's get
exactly.
another layer in here.
Or let's promote this person here, and you're going to be the chief product owner, and then you'll have all these product owner underlings. And
Right.
no, that's not the idea. So they're imposing this bureaucratic model onto Scrum at Scale that's not the intent of it. So I
Okay,
think that's
so
the
is this-
one.
is this
that's
sort
the
of a
one
Conway's-
That's the one danger.
This is kind of a Conway's Law thing, right? So we're looking at the complexity of your communication is based on the structure of the organization.
Could
And so
be.
we've right. So we've evolved away from the one responsible individual into a collective of people that come together and eventually come up with the responsible outcome. And then we throw them into an agile world and say, give us the one and only product owner. And they look at us and say, well, that's not going to happen. And so the best we can give you is 3 people from across three different work streams, part-time, focusing their attention on this. And then they don't know the technology side of this at all. So we're going to tie in a super uber technology leader with their ideas of what needs to happen. And then then they say, they're done.
Throw them all in a room, tell
Yeah.
them to fight it out.
So
Cage
we
match.
get
Steel
and
cage
so we
death
get-
match is how you decide what you do next. Yeah.
And at the worst, you see things where they never come together. They continually backbite and fight against each other and try and press their agenda over the other people's agenda. And whoever's got the loudest voice or the closest alignment to the people doing the work tends to win, right?
Yeah. And the team has no focus, no reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no one they can reliably turn to. So
Don't go that fast.
It's broken. There's a brokenness to that.
So,
Okay.
is it possible to truly attain a high degree of success without changing the structure of your organization?
No.
No. Unfortunately,
No.
Unfortunately, no. Well, okay. When you say success, though, define success. So, can you get product into the world without change? Sure.
No.
Can you continue to be shoveling money into the
Abyss.
furnaces of development? Sure. You can do all that stuff. Is what we're proposing a guarantee you're going to be more successful than what you're doing now?
Not really. No.
Unfortunately, not. Right? Does it have the potential to be? Yes, it does have the potential to be.
Would you say call it necessary but not sufficient?
Explain.
Well, in order to win the game, you have to put the uniform on. You have to show up. You have to know the rules. You have to have practice with the team.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do all that to win. But even if you do all that, doesn't mean you're going to win. It means you get a chance to play well. You
still
can
have to-
compete at the
You
level
still
you
have
need
to
to compete
outplay
at.
the competition. You still
have to do your
respond
jobs
to the
really, really
things.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I pose that because in a smaller organization, we can have a lot more influence on how they structure themselves. Frequently, again, with a startup, there's little structure to begin with, and so you can influence the future growth of that structure a lot more than in a large, $20 billion corporation that, you've got 15 or more, 20,000 people. Trying to change the structure of that kind of an organization. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think, we've heard of organizations that have ING, is one that, and I'm not saying, and that's called revolutionary change. That's not evolutionary change. That's revolutionary change. I'm not advocating for or against it, but it has been done before. But who has the appetite? What organizations do we observe that have the appetite for true structural change that enable better product representation, a better product operating model?
well, Okay, here's the thing: is that you can't just come in and say who's got the appetite to totally restructure their organization, because you've got to have a destination in mind and a reason for the restructuring. And there's still people in that mix, and you got to figure out where those people, what it means to them.
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time. You get in there and you start describing how we're going to empower teams, and project managers lose their minds, because it's like, wait a minute, I'm the one who empowers the team. That's me. And you're like, well,
How many organizations have that? I would say, so here's a way to think about it. Tell me if this is crazy. Probably zero, right? Because if you're talking about the organizations overall, it's full of people, and people have inertia, and people just trying to do their jobs mostly, right? I think the way if you really wanted to have a revolutionary change, which is almost impossible, the X factor is probably a leader who recognizes how big of a challenge this is going to be, right? And has a realistic understanding of what's going to be necessary, and the willingness and the authority and the whatever they need to take the whole organization through it, right? Does that make sense? Like, I wouldn't look for an organization that's ready to change, because none of them are. It's
Right.
like, yeah. If you're talking about the overall organization, it's really leaders have to go first, and they're responsible for the state of the organization and how it functions. So that's really the factor, wouldn't it?
yeah. And the realization that change is necessary implies there's something driving that change, which by extension implies something isn't quite as good as it could be right now. I'm saying that as
Totally.
carefully as I can.
Totally.
And so that's a reflection on the folks involved in the system as it is. So
Yeah.
how do you get over that? This change you're implying, this restructuring that you're suggesting we may need, is not in any way an insult or an attack against the people who are here.
Yeah.
Well, the prime directive. Look at the prime directive.
Well, you can describe it as an emergent problem, right? Especially if it's a rapidly growing organization. There's some stuff that you just don't have to worry about at smaller scales, because people can sort of move around and cover stuff, and it just is impossible at a certain level of growth. And so you could describe it as, the reward for doing good work and solving problems is to have more work and more problems.
Yeah.
That's the way I said it at certain times. It's like, okay, so now you're at this level. Now you have to think about this stuff. It doesn't mean anybody did anything wrong. It's that you actually the opposite. You climbed the ladder, now you're here, and now you have a new set of realities to.
Or the market has changed. Everything changes. The landscape changes constantly. And yes, you were successful up until now, but that's not what's going to make you successful going forward, because the market has changed, tastes have changed. Everything changed.
The speed
now what
of
are you gonna
change
do?
has changed.
It has, and it's getting faster.
Nobody could have predicted a worldwide pandemic, but here we are.
Yeah.
Well,
You're responsible. Not for the pandemic, but for your response. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch.
I think there were a few predictions. We just didn't want to listen to it, but
Fair enough.
I'm not gonna go down that road.
Yes, there's a rabbit hole staring us in the face that we have to avoid, because we've already spent X number of minutes, and I think we are probably have an episode here.
Probably.
Cool. Hey, I think we touched on a sliver of Cagan's product operating model stuff. I don't know if we want to explore some of the other elements, because, to your point, Matt, there's tons of opportunity to dissect that stuff and figure out in real terms how is it affecting or not affecting the organizations that we walk into. I don't know if you want to continue.
I think we
in
should do
another
that maybe
episode.
next time. Right?
Same bat time.
Same bad channel.
Has this been this Agile thing with Matt Beam? And also,
I think it has with Mike Marchi.
And Jeff Singleton.
very well. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Goodbye.
See you later.
Okay, I'm going to hit stop here.